Hello everyone, my name is Akira. I'm a pianist, piano teacher, and a translator who's lived in 3 different countries. On my channel, I'm posting videos of my performances and topics related to and not related to music. If you haven't done so, please subscribe and hit the bell button so you won't miss my future videos. So far, I posted videos about books I use for beginners technical training and intermediate technical training, along with the method books I use to get to the intermediate level, and what I use for intermediate students. I hope those videos were useful for all the students, self-learners, teachers, and everybody around the world. Today's video is going to be a lesson on the first piece in this book, Burgmuller 25 Easy and Progressive Studies. And if I get enough likes and requests, I'm going to make this into a series so I can cover all the 25 pieces. So please don't forget to hit the like button and leave your comment in comment section. Before I start, as usual, I want to say a huge thank you to my patrons on patreon.com. With your support, I'm getting closer and closer to making these videos more often. And if you're kind enough to support me and this channel for $3 or $10 per month, I'll leave a link to my Patreon page in the description. Alright, let's start. The first piece in this book is titled Frankness. I'm not gonna even try to pronounce the French word, because I can't. And it goes like this. So by the time I assign this book to my student, they have done all the basic training. So they know how to read, they know how to curve their fingers, they know how to count the rhythm. So we're not going to talk about that at all. So reading music at this point is totally students' responsibility. Of course they can make mistake reading or they can get wrong rhythm from the notes, then I'll be happy to fix that. But basic reading is on the students at this point. Now, as the title of this book suggests, these are 25 easy and progressive studies. That means each piece has something specific that the students should be learning. And in this piece's case, I think that's what I call flowing legato. A lot of times when the students learn this piece, they come back and play it like this. Instead of. The first one sounds like you're stomping on the keys. It's very, very percussive. And the second one is a lot more legato. And that's not students' fault, because that's what they've been learning. Depending on how students are learning each piece, sometimes I go into more depth and teach them musicality and other aspects of playing piano in the beginner level too. But my main focus in the beginner level is to give the students enough technique and knowledge and skill to be able to play the music on their own, so that when we get into the intermediate level, we can add more depth to it. For my hand-on video, I got a lot of comments saying, how can you become a pianist just by doing mechanical exercises? How do you learn the musicality? Well, this is where you do that. I don't teach musicality in hand-on. Hand-on is just for pure technique. Anyway, Burgmuller is really where I focus on musicality. So let's talk about this flowing legato. What is it? So the very first concept of legato is where you connect from one note to another smoothly. So instead of playing like this, you're supposed to hold the old key until you play the new key, like this. But as you can notice, even though there's no silence in between the notes, it's still percussive. And if you think about it, piano is sort of like a percussion instrument. There are hammers that hit the strings. So because of that, piano can never be as smooth as, say, violin, where you can do one bow and then go through several notes. However, you can still achieve the higher level of smoothness by giving it a little more thoughts and using certain technique. For example, one of the biggest reasons why you get the percussive sound is because your fingers are playing from the air, like this. Oftentimes, the beginner students have lots of gaps between the key and the fingertip, and that creates a momentum before you hit the key. So each key you play gets a little more extra accent. So your fingers should be really touching the keys all the time, all the 5 fingers on the key, and only move as much as you need to hit the bottom of the key, like this. And never lift your finger up like this. If you think about it, lifting your finger against the gravity requires some tension in your hands. And those extra tension is what causes a lot of technical problems as you get to the advanced level. So you want to keep the hands as relaxed as possible. Secondly, when you play the key, for example, when I play this pinky, see how my hand moves. You can see my hand goes to the right and forward a little bit. At the same time, it goes a little higher too. Now my hand goes higher because right now my hand is just resting on the key, but when I play the key like this, my pinky establishes a nice connection to the key and acts like a support, like your leg. So when you kick your floor, or when you try to stand, and when you kick the floor, your body goes up. The same way, your hand should go up when your pinky kicks the bottom of the key. Now also my hand goes to the right a little bit, because my pinky is not going straight to the piano like this third finger right here. It goes a little bit diagonally this way. So when the pinky tries to curve in more and hit the key, it slightly pulls the hand to the right. And the fingertip with which you play the key is connected through these joints to your hand and to the wrist and elbow to the shoulder and eventually your whole upper body. So it's natural for your hand to move a little bit to the direction of the key when you play the key. Similarly, when I play the thumb, it does the opposite thing. On the other hand, if I play the third finger right now, it just pulls my hand straight toward the piano. Of course, it goes a little bit higher because now the third finger is becoming the support for my hand. So each one of these fingers played correctly tries to pull the hand to a certain direction. And if your hand and wrist and arms are relaxed, then everything should follow the fingers, like this. Now you might say, wait Akira, you told me not to move the hands and wrists. Yes, I do tell that to the beginner students, because if I don't, they all do this. Now this is different from what I showed earlier. In this case, your wrist or hand is pushing down the fingers. And if you don't have strong fingers, it easily collapses. So I'm not even exaggerating, but sometimes beginner students play like this. So to beginner students, I teach them not to move your wrist, not to move your hand, just do everything with your finger power. And that gives a very, very good foundation to start adding hand motion and start unlocking your wrist. But now that you've done all the beginner work, it's time for you to start unlocking your wrist and make your hands move freely. Again, the point is, it's not the hand pushing down the fingers, but it's the fingers that's pulling your hand, and arms, and elbow, and shoulder. So when I play this passage, I let the fingers do their own thing, and all the other parts in my arms up to shoulder, just let them do it. Meaning they don't interfere with the natural motion, like this. In other words, if you are playing this pinky, and if your hand is not moving, that means my pinky is trying to pull this way. But then my hand is trying to pull back this way, so your fingers are always fighting. So just by doing these two things, your fingers are no longer stamping on the key and building momentum before playing, and also your fingers are not fighting with the rest of your arm. So your sound gets much smoother. But there's one more thing to think about. In this video, I talked about how music is like language, and a lot of things you can say about the language can be said for music too. And one of those things is that the music never is monotone. Just like when we are talking, we're not monotone. We don't talk like this like a robot. But there's always up and down of the loudness and intonation, accent, and all that. So in order for music to be a natural language, it should also have ups and downs of the dynamic level. And this doesn't have to be a big change, but I'm never playing two notes at the same dynamic level. In other words, I'm always putting small crescendo and diminuendo as the melody goes. And the rule of thumb is when the melody goes up, you put crescendo. When the melody goes down, when you put diminuendo. Now this is a basic rule. There's always exception to that, which I'm going to talk later on. But 9 out of 10 times, if you follow this rule, then your music sounds natural. For example, in this beginning. So in these two measures, there's a crescendo and diminuendo. And if you look carefully, from the first measure to second measure, the melody is going up higher, right? The first one is going from G, second one is going from C. And then after that diminuendo, it goes back to G. It's going down. So in the bigger picture, you can see second measure is higher than first measure, and the third measure goes down to the same level as the first measure. So this crescendo and diminuendo coincides with what I just said. When the melody goes up, you put crescendo. When the melody goes down, you put diminuendo. But if you also look at the smaller picture, and if you concentrate on that four notes, G, E, D, C, then it's going down. So what I usually do is I put a small diminuendo, but when I play the next G, E, D, C, then I'm going to start a little louder. And even though I do diminuendo, I try to end up being a little louder than the end of the first one. And of course, when I go to this C, I put a little emphasis. And then again diminuendo, and this one maybe I start a little softer than first one, and then further diminuendo back to where I first started. And the next two measures is pretty stable. You just put a little bit of diminuendo, crescendo. Again, it doesn't have to be a big crescendo diminuendo. But if you look at the first two measures, I wrote so many things in, and if you just saw this for the first time, it's going to be very overwhelming. And also, this is what we call interpretation. So how much of a crescendo do you do here? How much of a diminuendo you do here? You can't write every single detail of the expression of music. There's almost infinite consideration. So the composers and editors of music put a little bit of instruction, like put a crescendo here, put a diminuendo here, but they can't tell you every single thing what to do. That's your job as a performer. And I think this is the most fun part of learning music, at least to me. I don't really like the initial part of reading a new piece because it takes a lot of time for me. To me, being able to play the right key at the right timing is just the beginning. Being able to play the right key at the right timing, anybody can do it if you can read the notes and then if you learn the basics of the piano. But from there on, what you put in is what makes that music your own. And that's what makes you a unique pianist. If all the task of a pianist is to play the right key at the right timing, we should have given that to the automation long ago. But only humans can judge how much crescendo you want to do, and it can change from day to day. Sometimes I play a little slower for a more relaxed audience, or a little quicker for somebody who wants more excitement. It can depending on my mood, or audience's mood, or the weather. There's so much involved in live performance. And also, there's no right or wrong interpretation. So what I'm introducing here is just my interpretation. You don't have to copy 100%. I always love to hear my students' interpretation, and I always ask why you did that. And in my studio, if you can convince me, you don't have to follow my interpretation as is. So anyway, let's get back to this music. Now we talked about the first line already. Now you have this crescendo and then diminuendo written in. And I agree. Even though the melody is going down a little bit, this crescendo sets up really nicely to this D7 chord. A little intense. And nice cadence in G major. So you go. That'll conclude the first section very nicely. Second part. You see this right hand going down and left hand going up, and it's creating natural diminuendo. So I would just follow that. And of course, left hand does that hand movement too. Because remember, now we're unlocking all the joints. You still have to keep the fingers curved and use a fingertip, but other than that, your hands are free to move, so left hand can move too and make it smoother as well. Now here, your right hand stops, and then left hand has a bit of melody here. And then because left hand's going up, it has crescendo. And back to both hands. And I forgot to mention this. At the end of the phrase, it's usually effective if you put a diminuendo. So when you do this, instead of, don't smash the ending. Now let's play this one more time. All right, and then you have this more intense part. Now everybody misses this G, F sharp, half note, holds through it while playing E, D, C, E, D, C. This A right here is a climax. That's the highest point in this section. So now it has a sforzando to emphasize that. So go ahead and do that, and then come back down, and then calmly finish the section. Now, second time, it doesn't stop, but it keeps going to minor section. It gets a little darker. Same thing, diminuendo. Now this book actually tells you to do that. Now it's your left hand's turn to sing. Of course, I'm putting a little bit of crescendo and diminuendo towards the end of the phrase. And second one is the same thing but softer. When you do pianissimo, if you take the arm weight off, it gets easier to play nice and gentle. Alright, so in this music, what I want my students to achieve is to bring their legato to the next level. Not just physically connecting from note to note, but to make it a lot more smoother. And in order to do that, first you're gonna have to get rid of your distance from your fingertip to the key and unlock your wrist, elbow, shoulder, so your fingers can move the arms freely. In other words, your arms won't restrict the fingers' movement. And lastly, never ever play two notes in the same way. There's always dynamic nuance going on. Like I said, you don't want to have a big crescendo, diminuendo, obvious ones, but always think about, okay, in this passage I want to get a little louder, a little softer, and if you just think about it, your fingers will do it. Pianos are very interesting instruments. It looks like it's just a machine that makes a sound when you hit the key, but whatever the performer is thinking about, it comes out to the sound. Alright, so that's it for today. If you liked this video, or if you learned something, as always, please hit the like button. That way YouTube algorithm will know this is a good content and start spreading to other people as well. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment section. And if you still haven't done so, please subscribe and hit the bell button so you won't miss my future videos. Like I said in the beginning, If enough people watch, share, and like this video and leave them in a comment, I will make this into a whole series and I'm gonna talk about all the 25 pieces in this book. Alright, I'll see you in the next video, whatever that's gonna be. Bye bye!